It was a warm Saturday morning, and the sky above the countryside was clear and blue. Birds chirped in the distance, and a light breeze moved through the trees surrounding the quiet wedding venue. Everything was set for what should have been a perfect day. White folding chairs were lined up on the lawn, soft music played through hidden speakers, and flowers in cream and blush colors decorated every table. Jordan, a black woman in her 30s, arrived early as planned. She wore a sleek black pantsuit and carried her camera gear with ease. Her natural hair was tied back neatly, and she had a calm, focused look as she stepped into the venue. She had done hundreds of weddings before and was proud of her work. Today was no different, at least that's what she thought. As she walked through the garden, she paused for a moment to admire the light falling on the trees. It was the perfect backdrop for couple portraits. She smiled quietly and made a mental note of the angle she'd shoot from later. Jordan had been booked a month ago through an online platform. All communication had been through email, mostly with the bride, Emily. Jordan entered the main hall to check in with the coordinator. The room was filled with soft chatter, clinking glasses, and the buzz of preparation. Vendors moved quickly, placing decorations and checking final details. Jordan greeted the planner politely, then began setting up her camera near the bride's suite to catch those first candid moments. Just as she was adjusting her lens, the door opened. Emily, the bride, stepped out in an elegant white lace gown. Her long train flowed behind her as she walked. Her blonde hair was styled high in an updo, and pearls hung from her ears. But her expression was far from joyful. Her eyes landed on Jordan, and her face quickly changed. There was a long pause. "Are you Jordan?" Emily asked, her voice sharp and surprised. Jordan looked up from her camera and nodded with a polite smile. "Yes, that's me. I'm here to capture your big day." Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. She looked Jordan up and down, then glanced at one of her bridesmaids behind her. The room grew quiet for a moment. Jordan stood still, calm and professional, not showing any reaction. "Huh," Emily muttered under her breath, but loud enough to hear. She didn't smile. She didn't welcome her. Instead, she turned around and walked back into the room without saying anything more. Jordan blinked, then slowly exhaled. She had seen this kind of moment before. She knew when she wasn't truly welcomed, but still, she had a job to do. She raised her camera and started photographing the details in the hallway. The shoes, the bouquet, the invitation. It was her way of staying grounded, staying focused. Behind her, the door clicked shut. Outside, the music continued to play. The guests hadn't arrived yet, and the real story of the day was only beginning. Jordan moved through the venue quietly, her camera hanging around her neck. The early sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting soft golden light across the white linens and floral arrangements. She snapped a few test shots, checking the lighting and angles. No one had spoken to her since the bride walked away. In the main room, the staff were still finishing up. Table numbers were being set out, candles were being lit, and a string quartet was rehearsing in the corner. Everything looked perfect from the outside. But inside, Jordan felt a shift. Something was off. She glanced at the time. Guests would start arriving soon, and she needed to capture some getting-ready photos. Usually, brides wanted these moments, shots of the dress hanging, makeup being done, and quiet laughter among the bridal party. Jordan knocked gently on the suite door. A bridesmaid opened it partway and looked surprised. Just a second," she said quickly, and closed the door again. Jordan waited. After a minute, the door opened fully, and Emily stepped out again. Her arms were crossed, and she didn't smile. She looked down the hall, then back at Jordan. "We've decided we don't need the photos right now," Emily said, her voice tight. "You can wait outside." Jordan blinked. Are you sure? These are usually some of the most requested moments. Yes, I'm sure, Emily replied, then turned away again. Jordan walked back down the hallway, her mind racing. This wasn't normal. She had been hired to photograph the whole day, from preparations to the final dance. Something didn't feel right. She tried to shake it off. Maybe the bride was nervous. Maybe it was stress. She took a few more shots of the decor, then moved outside to catch the groomsmen arriving. That's when she spotted the groom, Tyler. He stood near the garden arch, talking to the officiant. He looked up, noticed Jordan, and smiled slightly. Hey, Jordan, right? He said, walking over. Thanks for being here. I heard your work is amazing. His words caught her off guard. She hadn't expected warmth after what just happened inside. Thank you, she said. I'm just getting some setup shots before guests arrive. Tyler nodded. Great. If you need anything, let me know. He walked off to speak with another guest, leaving Jordan standing by the flower path, puzzled. His tone didn't match Emily's. He seemed genuine. As she prepared to take more shots, a voice called from behind. Excuse me, Jordan. She turned to see the wedding planner walking quickly toward her, holding a small envelope in one hand. I was told to give you this, the planner said quietly, avoiding eye contact. Jordan took the envelope and opened it. Inside was half her payment. No explanation. No apology. Emily says your services are no longer needed, the planner said, then hurried off before Jordan could respond. Jordan stood there, holding the envelope, stunned. Her fingers tightened around it. For a moment, she didn't move. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves above her. Everything around her looked peaceful, but inside, something had just been broken. She packed her bag in silence. Jordan walked slowly back to her car, her black camera bag resting on one shoulder. The gravel crunched softly under her shoes as the music from the venue faded behind her. Her mind was still spinning. She had been fired without warning, without reason. Just like that. She reached her car, opened the trunk, and placed her camera gear inside with care. She paused for a moment, staring at the envelope she had been handed. It felt light in her hand, and not just in weight. It felt like an insult, like her work and her time had been dismissed without a second thought. She sat in the driver's seat and closed the door. Silence. The kind of silence that wraps around you after something unfair happens. She rested her head against the steering wheel for a moment, breathing slowly. She didn't cry. She had trained herself not to. Over the years, Jordan had dealt with difficult clients, last-minute changes, and even rude guests. But this was something different. Outside the car window, guests began to arrive. They smiled, laughed, and took selfies near the garden. No one knew what had just happened. No one saw the quiet pain Jordan felt in that moment. She could have driven off. She could have left without a word. But something told her to stay just a little longer. She grabbed her water bottle and took a sip. Then she pulled out her phone to check her messages. That's when she saw it, a new text from an unknown number. Hi, Jordan. This is Tyler. Can I talk to you? I just found out what happened. She read it twice, unsure what to think. She replied, I'm in my car near the back lot. Within minutes, Tyler walked around the corner, still dressed in his light beige tuxedo. His face looked different now, tense, confused. When he reached her car, Jordan stepped out to meet him. I just heard from the planner, he said, his voice low. Emily let you go. Why? Jordan looked at him, unsure how much to say. She didn't give me a reason. Just said I was no longer needed and handed me half the payment. Tyler rubbed the back of his neck, clearly upset. I had no idea. I didn't agree to this. I chose you for a reason." "It's okay," Jordan said, though it wasn't. "No, it's not," he replied, glancing back at the venue. "I want to make this right." Jordan studied his face. He seemed sincere, but this wasn't her problem to fix. Still, something told her that there was more to this story than just a sudden firing. Something deeper. "You don't have to explain anything to me," she said. "But if you want to talk after the wedding, I'm open to that." Tyler nodded slowly. "Thank you. And again, I'm sorry. This isn't how things were supposed to go." Jordan gave a small nod and stepped back into her car. As Tyler walked away, she watched him disappear into the crowd of well-dressed guests. She turned the key in the ignition, but didn't start the engine. She sat quietly, waiting for the next part of the story to unfold. Jordan sat in her car for a while longer, her hands resting on the steering wheel. The bright sun outside made her feel even more disconnected from the scene at the venue. She could hear the sounds of laughter and chatter from guests, but all of it felt so distant, like she wasn't part of that world anymore. The world where things felt fair, where her hard work was respected. Her phone buzzed again. It was another text from Tyler. "Hey Jordan, are you still there? Emily wants to talk." Jordan read the message twice, then put the phone down. She wasn't sure what good it would do to speak to Emily again. After everything that had happened, she wasn't sure if anything could change. But then she thought about what Tyler had said. He didn't know about the firing. He had no part in it. He seemed genuinely concerned, which made her hesitate. After a few moments of thinking, Jordan decided to reply. "Okay, I'll come inside." She put the car in gear and slowly drove back to the venue. It wasn't easy to shake off the heavy feeling in her stomach. As she parked and stepped out, she noticed that the decorations were still pristine. The string quartet was playing softly in the background, and the guests were now gathering near the altar. Everything was picture perfect, except for the uncomfortable situation in the background. The wedding planner greeted her as she entered the venue, her face looking a bit uneasy. "Emily's waiting for you," she said quietly, leading the way. Jordan nodded and followed her down the hallway toward the bridal suite. The door was ajar, and Emily was standing by the window, her arms crossed. She didn't turn around when she heard the footsteps approach. "I'm sorry for the way things went earlier," Emily said, her voice strained. "I didn't handle it well." Jordan stood silently, watching the bride's back. She didn't feel the need to say anything just yet. The tension in the room was thick. Emily finally turned around, her face less angry but still serious. "Look," Emily continued, I didn't know how to handle the situation when I saw you." "I wasn't expecting." She trailed off, not finishing her sentence. "You weren't expecting me?" Jordan asked, keeping her voice even. "Or you weren't expecting a black photographer?" Emily flinched at the directness of the question. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. It seemed as though she was struggling to find the right thing to say. "I was just surprised," Emily finally said, but it didn't sound convincing. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "It hurt," Jordan replied simply. "But it's not the first time." Emily's face dropped. I didn't think about it like that. I was just focused on how the day would look." "That's not enough," Jordan said firmly. "You hired me. You should have trusted my work, no matter what I look like." There was a long silence. Emily's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she seemed genuinely remorseful. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered. "I made a mistake." Jordan looked at her for a moment, then turned to leave. The apology didn't change the hurt, but it was a start. At least Emily was beginning to understand. As Jordan stepped back into the hallway, she couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief. Things weren't perfect, but at least she had stood her ground. And that was something. Jordan stepped out of the bridal suite and into the quiet hallway. The weight of the conversation with Emily still hung in the air, but now there was a strange sense of finality. Emily had apologized, but Jordan wasn't sure if that apology would change anything in the long run. Some things, once said, couldn't be undone. The wedding planner gave Jordan a brief nod as she passed, her expression uncertain. Jordan didn't blame her. She had her own part to play in all of this, and it seemed like the situation had caught everyone off guard. Still, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that things hadn't been fully addressed. Emily's apology had been a start, but there was still more beneath the surface. As Jordan walked outside to take a breath, the sound of the string quartet continued to drift through the open windows. The soft notes of the music filled the air, but to her, it felt distant, like an echo of something she didn't belong to anymore. The guests were mingling, laughing, and the scene looked like any other perfect wedding day. But Jordan couldn't let herself forget what had happened earlier. She sat down on a nearby bench, taking a moment to collect her thoughts. The air was cool, and the light breeze rustled the leaves above her. It should have been a peaceful moment, but her mind was restless. Emily had made her mistake, but Jordan couldn't let go of the unfairness of the situation. She had worked so hard to get to where she was. Her talent had earned her this job. Yet here she was, being treated like she didn't belong. Her phone buzzed in her pocket again. It was another message from Tyler. "Hey Jordan, I'm really sorry about everything. I talked to Emily, and she's agreed to pay the full fee for your work. I know it doesn't fix anything, but it's the least we can do. Can we meet after the wedding?" Jordan stared at the screen for a moment, thinking. The offer was generous, but the money didn't matter. What mattered was the reason she was being treated this way in the first place. It wasn't about the paycheck, it was about respect. She typed out a reply. "Thanks, Tyler. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure it changes anything." She paused, looking out over the venue once again. The garden was still beautiful, the decorations still flawless. But the world felt different now. People walked by, unaware of the tension just beneath the surface. No one knew the story that had unfolded today. No one knew how quickly things could change, how easily a day could be disrupted by hidden biases and unspoken judgments. Jordan felt a small knot of frustration twist in her stomach. She had made a decision when she first became a photographer to always stand up for herself, to never let herself be dismissed. Today, she had done just that. But it didn't mean the fight was over. It was just one battle, and there were many more to come. She stood up, dusting off her pantsuit. The wedding was still going on. The guests were still celebrating, and Jordan. She was still standing, ready for whatever came next. As she walked back toward her car, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen when the story of this day got out. Would people listen? Would they understand? Or would it just fade away, like everything else that didn't fit the perfect picture? Only time would tell. The evening air had started to cool as the sun dipped lower in the sky. The guests were gathering near the outdoor reception area, sipping cocktails and chatting amongst themselves. Jordan could see through the large windows as the first few dances began inside the venue. Everything appeared perfect, but for her, it was all just noise. The real event had already happened, and it was still echoing in her mind. She sat in her car once more, parked far enough from the noise to have a moment to think. The day had been a roller coaster of emotions, surprise, anger, confusion. And still, there was something deeper gnawing at her. It wasn't just the unfairness of the situation. It was the sense that this wasn't an isolated event. She had experienced this kind of treatment before, in different places and under different circumstances. It was a harsh reminder of how deeply racism, could exist in the smallest, most unexpected moments. Jordan pulled out her phone again. There was another text from Tyler. "Jordan, I just spoke to Emily. She's insisting on having a conversation with you tonight. I know it's not ideal, but can you please come back? She's ready to make things right." Jordan read the message carefully. Part of her wanted to walk away, to drive off and leave it all behind. But another part of her wanted to hear what Emily had to say. If Emily was sincere, then maybe this was a chance for something real to come from the day. Or maybe it was just a chance to understand why someone who seemed so nice on the surface had acted so hurtful in the beginning. After a long pause, Jordan replied, "Okay, I'll be there." She put the car in gear and drove back to the venue. As she arrived, she noticed that the reception was in full swing. The guests were seated at their tables, and the lights inside the venue had been dimmed, casting a warm glow across the room. Laughter filled the air, but Jordan could still feel the distance between herself and the celebration. It was like being on the outside, looking in. Tyler was waiting for her at the door when she arrived. He smiled weakly, and Jordan could see the tension still lingering in his posture. "Thanks for coming back," he said. "Emily's inside. She's ready to talk." "I'm not sure what she wants to say, but I'm here," Jordan replied, her voice steady. He led her to a quiet corner of the venue where Emily was waiting. The bride's expression had softened since their last meeting. She was no longer the woman who had dismissed Jordan earlier. Now she seemed tired and sincere. Her shoulders hunched slightly, as if she carried the weight of her own guilt. "Jordan," Emily began, "I owe you an apology. I didn't handle things the way I should have. I was wrong, and I can't change that. But I need you to know that it wasn't about your work. It was about my own ignorance. I didn't realize how deep my bias went until today." Jordan listened quietly, unsure how to respond. The words sounded right, but were they enough? "I appreciate you saying that," Jordan said finally. "But apologies are just words. It's the actions that matter." Emily nodded, her eyes meeting Jordan's. "I know, and I want to show you that I'm committed to changing." For a moment, the two women stood in silence. The music from the reception played softly in the background, a reminder of the celebration happening just steps away. But in that quiet moment, something had shifted. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a beginning. The truth was, change would take time for both of them. Jordan wasn't sure what the future would hold, but at least for now, she had made her voice heard. And that was enough. The night had begun to settle into a calm rhythm. The guests were enjoying their meal, the soft hum of conversations filling the air, and the music continued in the background. Jordan, though, felt oddly detached from it all. She stood by the window, looking out over the venue's garden. The lights twinkled like stars, but it didn't feel like the magical evening it was meant to be. The tension from earlier still hung heavy in the air, and Jordan knew she wasn't the only one who felt it. Emily had returned to the reception, and the rest of the night continued on without much fanfare. But Jordan couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. The apology, the conversation, and what it all meant for her moving forward. It wasn't enough to erase the sting of being dismissed earlier, but it was a step in the right direction. At least Emily had taken responsibility, even if it was after the damage was already done. Tyler had remained by Jordan's side throughout the rest of the evening, his attempts to make things right evident in every gesture. But the question remained, could words really undo the hurt caused by someone's assumptions? Could Emily's apology be enough to change the way things were, not just for Jordan, but for everyone involved? Jordan sighed and turned away from the window, her gaze catching the faint reflection of her own face in the glass. She had always prided herself on her ability to stay calm in difficult situations, to hold her ground when necessary. But today had tested her more than most. She had been faced with the reality that not everyone saw her as equal, not everyone understood the weight of their actions. It was a hard truth, one that left her feeling both exhausted and determined. The evening began to wind down as guests made their way to the dance floor, their laughter growing louder as the music picked up tempo. Jordan felt a pang of isolation in the midst of it all. She wasn't part of the celebration, not truly. She had been pushed aside, and now she was trying to figure out what to do next. As the night went on, Jordan's phone buzzed once more. She checked the screen and saw another message from Tyler. "Jordan, thank you again for your patience tonight. I know it hasn't been easy, but I'm really grateful you came back. Emily's doing her best to make things right, and I think this is a step forward." Jordan read the message several times, considering how to respond. In the end, she simply typed, "Thanks, Tyler. I'm glad we talked." She leaned back against the wall, taking a deep breath. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it was an email. She opened it to find a thank you message from the wedding planning team. They apologized for the confusion and promised to handle things better in the future. For a moment, Jordan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of something better. Maybe, just maybe, people were starting to learn and understand. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to back down. She picked up her camera bag, checked the time, and started walking toward her car. The evening was winding down, and the guests were starting to leave. Jordan still had a job to do, even if it was no longer at this wedding. But as she walked through the quieting venue, she knew that her fight for respect, equality, and fairness would continue, no matter where she went next. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But tonight, she had made her stand. And that was something. The last guests had begun to leave, their laughter fading into the distance as they made their way to their cars. The reception was coming to an end, and the lights in the venue were slowly dimming. Jordan stood outside, watching as the last of the cars drove off into the night. It had been a long day, full of tension, misunderstandings, and difficult conversations. But now, as the world around her quieted down, she felt a sense of clarity. The sun had set, and the stars were beginning to twinkle in the clear sky above. Jordan leaned against the car, taking in the calm of the evening. Despite everything that had happened, there was something peaceful about this moment. She had faced the ugliness of prejudice and bias, but she had also stood strong in her beliefs. She had shown up, spoken up, and refused to be silenced. In a way, that was all she could do. Tyler had approached her one last time before he left. He had apologized again, thanking her for her professionalism and for staying through the difficult moments. Emily had said her final goodbyes too, her expression softer now, almost regretful. Jordan could see that she meant what she had said earlier, but she also knew that the road to real change wasn't quick or easy. It would take time, understanding, and real effort to shift the way people saw the world. Jordan looked at her camera bag sitting in the passenger seat of her car. She had taken photos throughout the day, capturing moments that told the true story of the wedding. But it wasn't just about the pictures anymore. It was about the message, about standing up for what was right. She had learned that even when people made mistakes, they could still choose to change. But that change needed to come from a place of true understanding, not just words. As she started the car and began driving away, Jordan thought about the future. Would things be different next time? Would people listen more carefully? She didn't have all the answers, but she did know one thing. She wasn't going to stop. Every job, every client, every moment was a chance to make a difference. And if she could inspire even one person to think differently, to challenge their assumptions, then it was worth it. The world wasn't perfect, but it could be better. And she would be part of that change. As the road stretched ahead of her, Jordan smiled to herself, knowing that this experience, painful as it had only made her stronger. She wasn't just a photographer. She was someone who understood the power of her voice and the importance of standing up for what was right. The night was still young, and the work was far from over. But for now, she drove into the night with a sense of peace, knowing that she had done what she could. And that was enough.